Greetings and welcome back to the Asylum on 107.3 Stafford FM. It's me, Gunnar, in the chair of destiny, joined this week by my able compatriot CK. How's it going, fella?
Good. How are you?
I'm alright, matey. It's been a long time no see.
It's been a while. Very excited about tonight's guest, though. Very excited.
Steve Strong on the line, yeah?
Definitely.
Good. We've got Steve there. Hey, Steve, welcome to the Asylum.
To you guys.
Good. How are you, buddy?
Sorry, mate. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. How are you, Steve? You alright?
Oh, good. That was a simple one. Yeah, fine. Thank you. Yeah.
That's the hard questions.
Start easy.
Got the most difficult one out the way. Steve, I wanted to ask you this just to start with, because we'll get into this a little bit later. But Aboriginal or original?
Overseas, probably Aboriginal, but within Australia, original, simply because this country believed they were the first in this country, and that the word ab in English is actually sort of always indicates something like abhorrent, abnormal. It always contradicts original. So they found the semantics quite galling. And secondly, they are the original people. They believe they are the first people, the first Homo sapiens on this planet, and they want to be called by that instead of being called what the invaders called them. So that's basic.
I guess that sort of, I guess the abo suffix then is kind of a
Well, there are still some that don't care either way.
Yeah,
yes, it is a bit. And I mean, we've got to be careful. We don't want to fight over semantics too much. But yeah, the word, in fact, is a better description of who these people we are, I should say.
I think that's going to factor into what we're going to talk about today, isn't it? So it's kind of why I wanted to ask that question first.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know, Steve, that you've said original people, they are the first people. So it's kind of how have you come about that story? How have you come about that idea that these were the first people? Is there any evidence out there? Or
Oh, yeah, but you said we've only got 2 sections of 40 minutes, so we're going to certainly have to cut it down a bit. Look, the evidence out there from a scientific viewpoint is absolutely voluminous. There's so much of it coming out on a daily basis that contradicts the notion that humanity began in Africa, that people streamed out of Africa, then popped. And to be honest, one of the linchpins of that particular belief was that they said, well, in Africa, you've got others before Homo sapiens sapien and Homo erectus, and there's a streamline of those, and they go back to 3.5 million years. So it seems logical to assume if the earlier hominids were there, which led on to Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and all the others, they say, well, therefore that should follow like that. Now, to be fair, there is some logic in that, but of course, as we all know now, or probably don't, but we should, as of 3 weeks ago, they found a hominid in Bulgaria, which is also of the same general type of setup, but it's 7 million years old.
Wow.
So the idea that humanity began in Africa because the earlier forms are in Africa is now out the window. It's ridiculous. And to be honest, with that, have gone out the window over the last 5 or 6 years. As I said, I won't do all of them because there's too many, but I will give you one.
Yeah.
Which focuses not so much on the female, Eve as it's called by some people, but Adam. That was supposed to be in Africa 180,000 years ago with Eve, and they made babies and they were called Homo sapien babies and the others weren't. That's how we're told it happened. The problem is there was a study done by 2 Russian scientists who I can't pronounce, and Evan isn't here because he knows them well, and he always gets to say those things. And it's called the walkthrough study, and it studied Y chromosome, which is what men carry. And they wanted to trace back where did Adam come from. And what they did was they took 400 donations of sperm and analysed them against 30 and figured out.
Oh, Steve, we lost you there a second.
What's going on now? Sorry,
we lost you there a second, dude. You said they took 6 million sperm cells, was it? And they test them against what?
No, they took 400 samples of sperm cells from 400 volunteers.
Right.
But none were African. They were from anywhere other than African. And what they wanted to do is compare against 13 distinct African markers and see the crossover.
Yeah.
And you can see the more the crossover, the longer, the closer the link. So there was a possibility of 5,200 links, and they scored none.
Wow.
Not one of these people.
Wow. So these people didn't originate in Africa then?
Because it means if Adam and Eve did get together, then this is a long-distance romance, and Adam had to come from a long way, meet with Eve, do the deed, and then back off to where he came from, because he didn't come from Africa.
Yeah.
Very important.
Wouldn't that also
people don't
put
realise,
ideas about
if you look at the general story of Jesus today,
ocean-going vessels?
Sorry, what was that?
Wouldn't that also take out the idea of ocean crossings? Because also, even if Adam came and did the deed and left, they weren't supposed to be crossing oceans at that time, were they?
No, they weren't. The first ocean crossing by a Homo sapiens sapien is supposed to have happened when the so-called African, first time they reckon there's evidence of hominids of any type sailing long distances. So yes, that would predate that by 150,000 years.
Wow.
If it happened. But the double problem is, ladies and gentlemen, that they've done many studies on the original genes, and time after time they come up as being more ancient. Now, it's very important people understand that. If I can, could I go back to the very first paper that came out with the out of Africa theory and named Adam and Eve, put up a molecular clock and said 150 to 180,000 years ago, Homo sapiens came out of Africa. Now, that paper was written by Alan Wilson and Professor Rebecca Cairn. And they came up with a molecular clock and said that 5,000 years ago, we separated from the monkeys, and around 150 to 180,000 years ago, all the hominids split. Homo sapien went one way and all the others went the other way. Okay? Now, the problem with that is they put that up and they said that the original people were the youngest and the Africans were the oldest, and they got their dating by using Australia. What they said was this. Okay, the original people who've been here 50 to 60,000 years ago, their genetic DNA, mitochondrial DNA, is 1/3 as diverse as Africans. So we multiply 3 by 60, 180,000 years. There's our numbers. You figure it out. That's how it's done.
What?
Seriously, I got the paper and read it. That's simple. Now, the problem is this. If you read the paper, and we have, he said that Homo sapien probably came out of Africa. I've got to make that point. At no stage did these people say they did. We've all taken it that way.
Yeah.
What then happened was Rebecca Cairn decided, I'm going to do some more research on this. So she got together 142 samples of mitochondrial DNA from 26 indigenous tribes. And she recalibrated. And she found out the oldest of all of the people there were the original people, and she came up with a date of 400,000 years, not 50, and said they came from 2 lineages. Well, she sent that information back to Alan Wilson. So what he did was he did something very scientific. He actually left Berkeley University, came to Australia twice, and personally sampled 32 original people of full descent. Thought, I'll do it properly myself. And this is where it gets interesting. He got 22 different strands of mitochondrial DNA, which means each one of, he's got a date of 77,000 years there. He said, but I only sampled 30 people. He said, I've got a mitochondrial diversion of 70%. Anywhere else in the world is below single figures. He said, they're the most diverse people on the planet. And then Alan Wilson then said, I got it wrong, that Homo sapiens came out of Australia first. Now, that's basically where we came into this story. And ever since then, study after study comes out the same way. Now, the most convincing study, and I'll close with this because honestly, guys, we could do this all day and you don't want to, honestly, but the most convincing one was done with 6 universities and it took 3 years and it was run by Harvard. So I figure that's pretty legit.
Yeah.
Harvard's not too bad on the scale of university. David Reich said, and he was a head researcher, he said, we tried so hard to make the results go. Every time we did, they got stronger. And what they did was this. They took 2, and I can't remember the other group, 2 tribes in the deepest part of the Amazon, and they sampled them because they married only with themselves, and they refused to marry with any other tribe.
Right.
Cut off. Their genetics is secure. If we sample them, we'll work out where the American Indian came from. Pretty simple, and that's good logic. 6 universities involved, took 3 years, sampled all of them, and they looked all around the world, and they found that the closest link by a long way were the Australian Aboriginal people. Their genes are the first genes in America. That's what they found. So what do we have here? We have a story, a genetic story. And let me close with this. The original people have, well, I'm original, and I've got 4.7% Denisovan in me. I've got Neanderthal in me. There's a new gene that only original people have. There's all sorts of genes, of all of them. Now, what is weird about this is the Africans, but don't forget, Homo erectus was out of it, they all did, has no mix with any other hominid at all. All the rest of us are mixed up with everyone. Now, they're supposed to be the oldest, so they were around with them before we were, because Asians and Europeans are supposed to be around for 40,000 years. Denisovans were around for 500,000 years to 16,000 years. So the Africans had as much chance as anyone to be with them. But there's not one African gene that is anything other than purely African. Yet they're trying to tell us that we all come from Africans. Well, why is it all the rest of us are mixtures and the original people have a gene that no one else in the world has? So where'd that come from? How could we have a gene in here that no one else has got? And conversely, the Denisovan genes, of which the original people have more than anyone else, were only found in Spain and Siberia. They never went to Australia. And when the Denisovans mixture came into Australia, we can work it out. It was 44,000 years ago. But the story tells that the Africans got to Australia 60,000 years ago, and it was sealed off until cooked. So how did the Denisovans get here 44,000 years ago? There's no way that can happen unless the original people were sailing the world and met all these other genes. And that's why the original people have the genes of everybody inside them. So that's what we're finding through the genes, the genetics, and the science that's coming out of the world today. It is a constant story where original dates now, they've just put a new date up. And all the scientists here have said, oh, you know how we said they got here 60,000 years ago? We're wrong. They're now saying here it's 65. And now some are saying 70. But when I was a kid, it was 20. Then it went to 40. Then it went to 50. Now it's gone to 70.
Yeah, it just keeps going back, doesn't it?
It does.
Are there any other countries, Steve, where we get evidence for this original DNA?
Sorry?
Do we get evidence for this original DNA in other countries?
Yes, we do.
I know you mentioned South America.
Now, your country, you, all the Europeans. Now, what the story with that is, the oldest Homo sapien found in the world is not found in Africa, nor is it in Europe. It's in Australia. Lake Mungo Man 3. According to Alan Thorne, he's 65,000 years old. When they found him, it was a complete skeleton there. And what they did was they took the mitochondrial DNA from his fingertip and they analysed it with the best science on the planet. They did this 10 years ago. They said, my God, he doesn't relate to anybody. He's a mutation. Let's forget him. Because he doesn't relate to original people, he doesn't relate to Europeans or Asians, forget him, let's not talk about him. And the scientists know what they're talking about because they wear lovely lab coats and they've got degrees. 6 months ago, someone decided to use some new mitochondrial DNA analysis and have another look at this pesky skeleton at 65,000 years old. Oh, you know, our first finding 10 years ago, forget about it. Still forget about it, but for a different reason. Because we found European genes inside this particular skeleton. European. Now, here's the problem. Europeans didn't come into existence until 40,000 years ago. This guy's at least 60,000 years old. So what are European genes doing inside somebody when they don't exist yet? The answer is simple. What it means is, oh, by the way, the scientist here said, oh, he's tainted with European genes. Let's forget about him. Well, how did the bloody Europeans get here 60,000 years ago when they don't exist? And nobody went by boat but Africans. So that's what they said. The reality is, European genes are original genes. The original genes are the precursors of all other genes. What they just discovered when they looked at one strand there was that strand that eventually became the European strand. But it's already in the original people. Well, that's simple. Look at the Africans. They've got nothing. They only carry African genes. Well, look at the original people. They're carrying European genes before Europeans come into existence. Gee, which came first?
Definitely not a chicken and egg scenario, that is it for sure. And when you can trace them back and you can actually place them with the original people long before, like I say, Europeans are supposed to have existed, surely it can only lead you to one conclusion, Steve.
Well, there is only one conclusion, really.
Yeah, absolutely. They have
Genes
to
are rich
be.
genes in America. We're finding this first part, and we're finding them in Europe, and we're not finding them in Africa. And we certainly have a crossover with the Asians too. It's pretty simple to do this, and it's not that hard. The problem I see, they made a discovery here of an axe. It's the oldest axe in the world. It's 25,000 years older than any other axe, and it's 65,000 years old. It's up in Cape Armland. So they said, oh, they must have got here 65,000 years ago. That's rubbish.
Yeah.
They found it dumped there 65,000 years ago. We don't know when they made it. But more importantly, what's interesting about that is if the axe was found 25,000 years before it was found anywhere else, does that mean the Africans that came out of Africa knew how to make the axe? And one group went to Australia, and all the other Africans forgot how to make the axe.
Yeah.
And kept doing it. And then 40,000 years ago, some Africans said, oh, shit, that axe. Let's make it again. What happened?
Can you remember that old tool we had years ago?
Yeah, yes. One of those things somebody told me about
It was
before.
really
I found an old
good.
diagram.
You
It's
could
called
cut
an axe.
trees
Let's
with it
do
and everything.
What? My question is this. If the oldest people found in the world, Homo sapiens, are found in Australia, and the oldest axe, which is one of the precursors of being a Homo sapien, isn't it? It's one of the markers, right? Because it's grounded, it's polished, it's a flash axe. It's nice. It will cut trees down. If it's found in Australia 65,000 years ago, and then the next oldest axe, 40,000 years, is found in Australia again, the one after, which is 35, is found in Australia, and the oldest axe found outside Australia is 23,000 years in Japan. So if our axe is 42,000 years older than anyone else's, where did Homo sapiens start working first?
Yeah.
And if you've got an axe here, where do you make your boats from?
Very good point. But it's crazy. Surely people can't be suggesting then that these artifacts that are out of place in Australia were dumped there 20,000, 30,000 years before anybody else had created an axe. And then somebody then created an axe after. That makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense.
It doesn't. See, this is the problem. One of the reasons why we have a lot of trouble in our own country with mainstream press, and we've been taken off national news, we look at their science and we ask questions about their science. Like when they were talking about this, it's quite funny. When they were discussing, 65,000 years, that makes a difference. We'll move it out by 5. I'm thinking to myself, one of the top archaeologists in our country is called Jim Bowler. 2 years ago, he went down on Midden in Victoria, which is the bottom of Australia, about 3,000 k's from where the Africans are supposed to have landed on the top edge. He found a midden there with a date no less than 80 and probably 90,000 years old of human activity in that midden. And you know what he said? He said this, I'm announcing it, the science is perfect, no one's challenged it. He said, but I'm not going to go any further with it. I'm not going to go any further because I want other dates like that. This could be an aberration. I want dates of over 60,000 years before I'll go back to this site. I've just written an article called Over You, Jim Bowell. And it's, you said you'd go back to Point Ritchie. Once there was another site that you accepted was over 60,000 years.
Right.
You got one.
So,
go back to your site now and do some more work there.
Yeah,
and then tell people that if they were in Victoria at 80 to 90,000 years and they landed the top end, it would have taken them 10 to 20,000 years to get there. So you put 20 on top of that to 100,000 years, not the 65 they're talking about it. Now, this guy, Jim Bowler, would be considered the staunchest defender of the out of Africa theory in Australia. And here he is with a date that kills his theory. So what does he say? I'm not touching it and convince me with another date. Now, there's a funny aftermath to this. Jim Bowler was involved with in a site on the Great Barrier Reef in 1983, where they found evidence of fire stick farming, which is what humans do, on the Great Barrier Reef 180,000 years ago. And wow. Jim Bowler signed that paper. He said, I back up the fact that humans were in Australia 180,000 years ago. Half that age, 20 years further on, He's forgotten what he did before. He completely forgot the first part, which is fair enough, because when I go shopping sometimes I forget things I'm supposed to get to, so I can't blame him.
Forget the top of the list and get everything on the bottom.
Yeah, I do forget things. So they spent 6 months at the Great Barrier Reef and came up with this date, and they put it through all the science, and it came up at 180,000 years. And 30 years later, he was on another site, which is half that date. And he says, I've never heard of any other date older than that.
What?
He just forgot. That's all it was.
It's like a shopping list, Steve. Come on.
It's tough, isn't it? You know, it was only 6 months on the Great Barrier Reef. You forget those things, don't you?
I've just predated human civilization or human history by about 180,000 years, or at least 90,000 years. That's the kind of thing that's going to slip your mind, I guess.
Easily done. Easily done.
Well, it's here. It's in this country. There's many places like this in this country. And the original people, as we were talking at the start, let's leave the science alone. They want to go back much further than 100,000, 200,000 years. And they don't want to talk about humans just evolving from just purely another hominid. They have another story about that, and that's where we do get some heavy flack from mainstream, because the original people will say to you, and I'll say what one uncle used to ring me up and always tell me at the finish every time he hung up the phone with the same saying. He'd always tell me, my grandmother told me time after time, do not forget, the Pleiadians are our countrymen. And of course, when you start talking like that, that's when mainstream really does it.
Yeah, they don't tend to like that kind of thing, do they? But here at the Asylum, we do like that kind of thing.
Yes, Chris. This is right up our street now.
So
sure.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about this Pleiadian influence. What's the link there?
Oh, yes, this Pleiadian influence. It goes like this. The original people, let's get this straight, ladies and gentlemen. We're only setting this base to give us a better idea of what follows. They are the first people. Therefore, they kept the first story. Now, the first story, we even have the sacred rock. We haven't. We're custodians of it. Story about people must understand something about this. This is the original story about this taking place. In other continents, different mobs came. And we don't talk about Syrians and others. It's got nothing to do with us. In this place, it was just the Pleiadians. And you'll notice that in Australia, we have around about 500 different languages, 500 different tribes, and each of them have their own dreaming stories. But there is only one dreaming story that goes to every part of Australia. And I've been all over, and they all talk about it as the most important story. It's the story of the 7 sisters that come from the Pleiades. Now, the belief they have, not belief, the truth that they carry. Let's not call this a belief. It is every elder I've spoken to has said the same thing about this. And I want to make a point. The first 3 books we wrote are published by University Press of America, and we never mentioned aliens in it. That was not our brief. We got involved in this not because we wanted to, because we were told to tell their truth. And we have a choice. So we did this, and you can check our first 3 books. We didn't come from this from a crusade. We are reluctant, sort of collateral damage, because every elder kept saying, start talking about it. So that's...
You're not telling the full story, Steve.
They came and they asked permission. Well, we don't have a choice. They asked for permission to cross genes. It was done through a concord and agreement between 2 races.
Wow.
One on this planet came from far off. And the difference was, according to what I was told, was they wanted to make something that was greater than the gods that created us. And that comes straight out of Gnosticism, the apocalypse of Adam. And that was the best from the earth, which was spiritual and magic. We had this. And the best from elsewhere, which were the Pleiadians. And what they did is they crossed those 2. And that is why, gentlemen, today, and this has only been known for the last 3 months, the scientists have found within original people, like myself, a set of genes they cannot identify because they do not belong to any hominid they found on this planet.
Wow.
It's strong, and it's in all people, but they can sit strongly in the original people. They are scratching their heads and saying, yes, only the original people have these genes, but we don't know where they come from on this planet.
Wow. So there is evidence then within the gene itself.
You can't find the hominid by now. They've got Homo erectus. Yeah, they've got
Yeah.
Homo red deer caveman. They've got 16 different hominids they've found now. They've got Florensis. They've got the little fellas. They know all of them back to front. They can't find this one. They need to look up into the sky because that's the missing genes. Now, according to there was a long-term plan. I've got the rock that tells us about the seeding of the planet by the Pleiadian people to seed the place, to bring it to life. I waited for one hominid to be so spiritual and to have the one key that all other alien races do not have. And that is why they're here. And the elders told me about that too.
So what's
that's
the key, Steve?
with this. They're all here because of us. We have something they don't have.
Wow. So that's the key. It's something that humans possess that is the reason why they've come here and crossbred.
I asked an uncle before he passed. And I asked Uncle Marba, young here in our country, I did ask him one day, I said, Uncle Marba, I said, why bother coming here? I'm a teacher. I taught history in high school. I told him the last 5,000 years, our story is we kill each other. We find different ways. Covering doesn't tell us all until after he died, and then we publish it and say what a great job they did. The rest of the time, we fight each other. I said, why would they bother coming? For God's sake, they're far more technical than we are. What have we got that they don't have?
Yeah.
And he smiled at me. He said, you must know. I said, Uncle Marbuck, I wouldn't be asking if I knew. I can't see it. I look around each day. Right now, we spend over 50 cents in every dollar made on this planet in security and warfare.
Yeah.
What? Who wants to come and check that out? That's a disaster. Then he told me. And he told me, he said, go back to the very first benevolent depiction on American TV of an alien helping humans. And he said that clue was given to Gene Roddenberry, and he will tell you that idea was channeled to him. And it's Dr. Spock. And he said, now I want you to think about Dr. Spock and put every alien on a list with him. He understood compassion. He understood what was right. He understood what was wrong, but he could never understand humans. That was the whole premise of that show. And you can ask Roddenberry, he did say that was channeled to him, because Dr. Spock is like a Pleiadian. He understands everything but one emotion, the most powerful emotion there is in the cosmos, and it's the one planet that radiates constantly, and that's love. That is what they're coming for. Let me give you a lovely example how love permeates all parts of this planet. In Australia, we have a lizard called the shingleback. It lives to about 25 years. It's slow moving, it's dull, and it wanders around in the desert. And when it crosses roads, it gets run over because it can't move quite quickly. If the female or male gets run over, the male will stand beside it and starve to death and try and bring it back to life. When they with one another, they just touch each other and follow each other all the time. Pure love. Start to finish. This is on the lower end of the scale that we have this pyramid. We think we're on top of it. We're not. They've got shown more love to each other than most humans do to their partners today.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm getting at is, Uncle Marbuck says, he said, this is where the veil is the strongest because this is the most powerful planet there is. Some of the aliens come here and cut us up to try and find how this love comes out of us because they think it's a physiological thing. The Pleiadians are himself, and that's why they came here and that's why they crossbred with us, because they want to experience it. Now, all of those aliens, to an extent by being near this place, are changing.
Yeah.
There's a good chance the Syrians now are more benevolent than they used to be when they first came here looking for miners and changed our DNA like that. But the Pleiadians knew of it to begin with. And that's what Uncle Marbuck said, and that is why the Pleiadians came to Australia, because there was a concord to them and magic in this place, and they understood love. The Pleiadians had all the technology. And gee, hasn't that helped us a lot since they've dumped technology into our planet? That was the one mistake they brought with us. They should have realised this is a planet that works on high spiritual octane.
Yes. What you mean that the technology is actually
every time it
destroyed
gets
us?
ahead of us. Yes, it does, and it's done it before, and we know that. Ask the Hopi, ask the original people. We've risen 3 or 4 times when technology gets in front of our spirituality.
Yeah,
We fall apart.
100%.
And then we go back to a long period where we live under the auspices of the dreaming, where we live with the land. And then about 5,000-6,000 years ago, men start to behave badly. They start to compete with nature. We start to farm. Then the men take control, and be careful. That is the big mistake. As soon as men start taking control, that's the final step where you can't pull back. The elders are telling you now, when this change comes, the women will be taking over again. Because the men, unfortunately, they get too angry.
We destroy and we consume. We want to control and dominate everything. Steve, just talking about this then. So what's your theory on ideas like Atlantis? Because I mean, this is what kind of Plato said, wasn't it? That this advanced civilization.
Atlantis is what the elders told me, that Lemuria is Australia.
Yeah.
They call Lemuria, some of the elders have actually called it, not through my prompting, they've called this place Mu, not Australia.
Yes, Steve, because we know this, don't we? There's a huge part of Australia now that's basically under the water, that would have been like landlocked to the Philippines or some of the islands in the sort of in the Pacific, I guess.
I'm guessing the Indonesian archipelago would be, if you talk sort of pre-Ice Age. I mean, I was wondering this. I've been to Gunung Padang, and there's also the place in Namadol in Micronesia. I wonder if that would have been quite easy to get to a certain amount of time ago, and perhaps it was the original people that built those places.
Yeah, it wasn't. And you've got to remember, we've seen a lot of sites around here, and I've asked the elders, because we only do this. Every site we go to, we get permission. We've done this only through them from start to finish. And I can tell you, they've all told me the same thing, and we've seen the evidence too. There was warfare. One of these ones wasn't natural. There is melted rock. There's a civilization. We've been to one place, I can't mention its name because it's given the same geographic place, where I've been sitting inside gutters that you could sit in perfectly straight, blown to pieces. Something major happened. And I think it was between the Pleiadians, between the Syrians and others, and Atlantis was part of it for sure. So was Lemuria. My understanding is, from what the elders have told me, that one mob went really heavy technologically, which is the Atlantean mob, and the Lemurian mob, and after that, the original people wiped their hands of the whole thing. After that warfare, that's why they went naked. They dumped all technology. They got rid of all of it. It wasn't through ignorance, it was through intelligence. They said, this just doesn't work. And they made a rule in Australia. And remember, until Cook came, nobody farmed the land anywhere in Australia ever. That was a rule. They had rules like that stopped them down that mistaking. They made sure of it. And they also made another rule that women's magic was always stronger than men's magic. Now, that's very important. In most societies and most tribes there, the act of conception was between the spirit and the women alone. So they made a system where the women were honoured, and we wouldn't fall into the trap of what we did about 5,000 years ago, where we took over and we didn't listen to women anymore. That's when men behave badly and they don't play well in the sandpit. In Australia, if two men did fight, and they did, we're not perfect here, within a tribe, they could only fight if they could find a woman to act as judge, and she would tell them when to stop. And if the man didn't stop, the other men would bash him to a pulp for not doing it. So the men knew they had to get the women and give them equal say so they didn't get ahead of themselves.
Yeah.
So they understood that from the last conflagration. We think that, like Graham Hancock, that time of around 11 to 12,000 years, this happened. And we do know, the scientists will tell you, that the world population dropped by 95% then. They'll tell you, but they won't say why. They'll just, it just happened, These things occur, and then we were right after that. No, it wasn't quite like that.
One of Hancock's big theories about this is that a comet hit the North American plate, wasn't it? I think somewhere around the sort of the Antarctic or Canada area. Yeah. Do you subscribe to that, or are you suggesting that there was this war, this technological war, spiritual war on the planet that took place as a result of what happened with the Pleiadians?
Well, Graham's antagonism with UFOs sort of being part of this story, is not so much that he doesn't believe in them. And actually, when he came to Australia, and he spent 6 days with us on country and with the elders, he came away believing the aliens came here, but he believes humans can make this stuff. right? And
Right.
this is what I'm trying to say too. When the Pleiadians come here, we weren't dribbling idiots. We were the equal of them in many ways and better than some. That's why they came here, because this was a meeting of equals. So we sort of believe the same thing. But I think the problem, and we've said this many times, whether it's Syrian, Pleiadian, or any other mob that came in, there's quite a few, that's the sort of, even the Pleiadians did it too. And that technology, we have to work out, and this is a system that works differently. Look, if I can explain it to you like this, if I was to offer you one of two choices, I've seen one, Graham, and I'm using this because Graham saw it. This is what I'm getting up to.
Yeah.
If I was to offer you the best flat screen TV that's ever been made, or to spend one night spent with me in front of one of my other elders who just passed on, whose name is Kano. In fact, we're doing a webinar about him next month. And Kano appeared out of nowhere, all done up old way, loincloth, painted all over him, singing in song, said a little bit in language, said a little bit in English, all things, did the whispering song, then walked back a step, walked back a second step in front of 10 and 11 people, including Graham and Santha, and completely disappeared.
Wow.
Then reappeared about a second later, about 50 metres behind his wife. We did ask his wife later.
Yeah.
No. Kano's wife.
Oh, okay.
Santha was sitting next to Graham at the time. Now, if you see Graham, you could ask him. I'm saying that because Graham was there at the time.
Wow.
He did say at the end of it, one of the most amazing days he's ever had in Australia with Kano. I thought, oh, thanks. Graham just spent 6 days on country with us and forgot about it just because he can disappear in front of your eyes.
It's a fair trick, though. It is a fair trick.
It is a good trick.
If someone came up to Christine, Kano's wife, and said to Christine, how did he? She said, bloody no, I've never seen it before myself. But he did tell someone later. He said, it's simple. Every human must understand we all come from both sides. I just know how to get there.
Wow.
You don't yet. Now, my point is, if you had the choice between a great flat screen TV or to sit at that campfire and watch an elder disappear in front of your eyes, then reappear someone else, what would you choose?
I think we all know
we would definitely choose the elder, definitely.
We're supposed to be. And this is the point here. I'll give you another one. These are true stories I'm not making up. This is another one involving near Gosford, 3,000 Ks from Kangaroo Island, Carter. I didn't tell Kano, it's not his country, don't need to. Went on the country, but my elder there, Arnie Bev, was crook. She couldn't take us on the country and couldn't smoke us. So I did another ceremony that Uncle Jerry gave me before we went to this sacred site. As we got to that sacred site, a brown owl flew out and left us a feather. And we all thought, oh, what a wonderful sign that is. Oh, this is looking deadly. So we filmed it. We filmed orbs running around. Interesting stuff. We got back that night, all pretty chuffed about what happened. 4 hours after, and I get a phone call from Kano. And that is bad news. Because normally when an elder wants to talk to you, someone else rings on their behalf and tells you to talk to them.
Right.
When your elder talks to you straight away, you're in deep ish. Kano wants to talk to you. He said, oh, give me the phone. What's up? I said, I know, but he sounds angry. I said, oh, Christ. He said, this morning, he said, well, you on country? I said, yeah, but it wasn't your country. He said, it was Gosford, wasn't it? He said, yeah, but Kano, it's not your... He said, I've got a big kangaroo in front of me. And he told me that when you went onto that place, you built the rocks, but you didn't smoke yourself, did you? I said, no. He said, yeah. He said, he also told me this, if you ever go on the country again and you don't smoke yourself, they'll kill you. Remember that? And he hung the phone up. Here's the trick. That happened 4 hours before. Kano lives 3,000 Ks away. That message got to him doing 750 Ks per hour that started through an owl and ended up in a red kangaroo. And he rung up and told me what I'd done, exactly what I'd done, how I built the rocks, why I was there. I never told him. But you know that story, Dr. Dolittle?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. That's the same guy that can disappear, can also talk to the animals, and they can talk to him. That's my point. And it's an important point. I was lucky enough to see those things and hear those things and be part of them. Talk that stop making flat screen TVs, learn how to disappear and learn how to talk to the animals will be much more.
Absolutely. As you said about that gentleman, you know, I know how to get to the other side. We're of both sides, but I know how to get there.
Yeah. Well, remember, original people believed that every person has magic within them, and when they're born, one of their jobs is to find your magic.
Cool.
That's how things work.
Yeah, I like that tagline, find your magic.
So it's your responsibility to find your own magic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Steve,
you do.
Steve, I love it. We're going to hold you there. That's a lovely place to stop, actually. I'm going to go find my magic for a couple of minutes. Dude, we'll bring you back in a few minutes, all right?
All right, I'll do the same.
So that's the first part of Steve Strong's interview tonight. Of course, pretty magic. Tune in for the last hour tonight here on the Asylum on 107.3, which promises, I assure you, to be a lot more magic and a lot more insane. Asylum. Welcome back then, you listen to the Asylum on 107.3 Stafford FM. It's me, Gunnar, in the chair of destiny, joined by my able compatriot CK.
Hello!
And today we've got the brilliant guest and a fantastic first hour, Steve Strong, on the line, talking to us about some incredible theories, some incredible ideas. Steve, you were telling us before the break, and I just want to recap this quickly. The guys who created the Out of Africa theory basically realised that they'd kind of made a mistake. They came to Australia and realised that the originals, what we know as the Aboriginals maybe, basically predated any of these African civilizations or hominids that came out of Africa. Recanted what they said. Is that pretty much what happened?
Yeah, it was, because Wilson actually, there's a quote which we've used quite often. Alan Wilson, he was the main researcher.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the only quote I can remember, because I've got a very poor memory. Don't have any short-term memory.
Oh, damn that shopping list. It's only 180,000 years old. How could you possibly remember it?
I don't know either. But he said something like it may be too far out to admit, but while Homo erectus was muddling around in the rest of the world, a few of them got to Australia and did something dramatically different, not only with stone tools. For it was here that Homo sapien first evolved and then went out to the rest of the world. So basically, yeah, that's what they said. They both came to the realization that their genetic clock, where they said the original genes were 1/3 the diversity of the African genes, they found out they were 8 times more diverse than the African genes.
Wow.
So they're out by a factor of 24. They also said that they've been here for 50,000 years. There are dates in Australia of 120, 180. 80,000, 90,000 years, 50,000 years is not even close to what's going on. They didn't even know that. They just knew the genes were wrong, and they are wrong. Look, there are pictures of original people, full-blood original people taken by Baldwin Spencer very early on in the piece, of kids running around the desert with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Wow.
There are original people that have got curly hair, straight hair.
Yeah.
Some have got very light hair, a very light skin, and some have got purple skin. There are so many varieties and variations within the original people, but that's to be found out time enough. In fact, I believe Graham Hancock, I just saw his latest work. His latest work now is going to pick up on America and the Australian original people in America first. That's the fact that he's working on. So, yes, it's starting to fall apart. So, what's important to understand is it breaks down something very fundamental to the way we think. And I think this is really important. We have this notion that we fought our way out of the jungles of Africa. We were better than all the other hominids and stronger and smarter, and we beat them and we won. And we have this sort of combative sort of thought about how we evolved as humans. And always you'll hear the story about how we had to fight against other things to overcome them. And then we fought against ourselves. So we sort of convinced ourselves that this is what we do. Homo sapien angry. We fight each other all the time. This is what we're like. We got to the top of the pyramid because we were stronger and smarter. The original story is completely different. It's a bit like when you get your wisdom, you go on walkabout for 4 months and go off on your own.
Yeah.
And that's your rite of passage. You spend your time with the land and the spirits, and it's a different way of doing things. What we're saying is that every now and then humans forget and they go crazy and the whole thing falls apart our civilizations fall down and we start again. We've done this 3 times before, and I'm told when this one gets fixed up, we'll never forget again.
Wow. Because that's something that you and I believe, Chris, isn't it? That a reset is almost coming.
Absolutely. We very much into this idea of cycles and that it all the whole thing keeps resetting itself. So is there, Steve, is there a point of no return here? I know you mentioned it earlier. And what is that point of no return for us?
Well, it's funny that you asked this. I got a phone call from a lawman probably a week and a half ago. I've got to be very cryptic about this because he told me stuff with confidence about a time and a place and an event that I'm just shaking my head about. Guy comes from right in the middle. He's from the old way intelligent ones, the ones that have held that. And my take is this, and I was concerned when I was told what he told me. I said, oh, for God's sake, even the doubters, even the people who work for bloody Bayer and work for the chemo companies would say, I'm not doing it anymore. I can see I'm wrong. I said, that sucks. He said, no. He said, when that happens, you had to have made the choice. And I thought, oh, that sounds better now. So, yes, I've known for quite some time. The elders have been very vague until I got that phone call a week and a half ago when I got a place. I got a number of people and got some specifics. And I said, you sure? He said, absolutely. We've already made the agreement. They claimed they had a treaty or compact with the Pleiadians and it's been called in. That's all I got from them. And I got a lot of questions.
So do you want to call that end times?
And I knew this. No. I'm going to say one thing. I'll say one thing that I didn't understand, and I asked for more and got more, because that's how the elders work. They give you information. What they said, or what he said that they said, was after this event takes place, and I can't be more specific than that, there will exist on this planet 2 realities. Now, I have no idea what that means, but that's what they said. 2 realities. Some will choose one, and those that can't choose that will be given the other, which gets back to what I've said.
Dude, that sounds so biblical, though.
Sorry?
It sounds so biblical.
Oh, if I told you more information, it'd even sound more so. But I can tell you, you've got to remember that all the old books, all the old religious books were the history books, because there were no history books until about 2,000 years ago. Yeah. All our history was contained in biblical books that were then passed on. There was one comment that was made to me that sounded 40 times more biblical than what you said, and I said, oh, my God, that's come out of the Old Testament. He said, no. He said the Old Testament came out of us. They just got it wrong. Yeah. So, yes, but my take is that that's an incidental sideshow, because the main event is each person has got to make a decision within themselves about what is right and what is wrong. There are things that are going wrong on this planet all over. And as Einstein said, the highest form of stupidity when you make a mistake is to keep making the same mistakes again and again, which is all now.
Expecting a different result.
Now it's time for each person to realise what the truth is, which is what we're talking about now, and the obligation each person has to commit themselves to that truth. Now, my understanding is when this event takes place, you had to sign on your own dotted line and it will be known. So after that point, it's more like instigating this double reality they talk about. Mind you, the next time that elder does ring me up, because the problem with that particular elder is he never leaves his phone number. He just rings you at certain times and you just get to him. So, yes, in answer to your question, there was always talk of something that was going to be seminal. Until I got that phone call, I didn't know what the something was, nor did I knew it was that definite. Now, my take on that is, very simply, I say it's a 51% chance it will happen and 49% that it won't, because nothing is said in the future that's in concrete. Even Nostradamus said that in the finish. But it could happen. I do believe it could happen. And I think because it came from the person that did, it is a person I have the highest regard for, and who also recognised some of the sacred rocks and understood what they meant. So he's a person who knows the old way. he's adamant that the change is coming.
So, Steve, do you know who Bill Hicks is?
The
American, yeah. So
yeah.
I'm just going to say this, right? And you can either react or not in relation to these two realities. The eyes of love see all of us together as one. The eyes of hate want us to hide ourselves away and lock our doors and take ourselves away from the rest of the world. Would that have any bearing on this?
Oh, shit, yeah. Yeah. Look, it's not a matter of this.
Right.
If just because you got nose rings, right, and you smoke lots of dope, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be that particular thing. It's to do with one thing. And the elders told me before, you'll be measured by one thing alone, not results, not what you say, but your intentions.
What's in your heart?
Do you carry good intentions?
What's in your heart? Isn't that basically what the Bible says about judgment? When the final day comes, you'll be.
Isn't that what the Egyptians said? Your heart would be weighed against that of a feather.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh. Yeah. Look, it's all around that you be judged not by the money, which means the Rothschilds. Be a bit careful because the bank is not going to help you much.
But
and that's because start spending that money, guys. You're running out of time. It'll be a matter of. Yeah, your soul will be your witness, won't it?
Yeah.
Your soul bears everything you've done. It will be shown to yourself. I've got an idea that some people may fall asleep and they may not wake up. I don't know. But I do know this, that it's easy to make a decision when the answer is in front of you. It's harder to make a decision when it's based on faith and intuition, but that's what they want. You've got to make your decision with a fair lashing of intuition and faith in it. You've got to believe that there is a better way than doing this, and you've got to actually be ready for it because it's got to happen now. I mean, for God's sake, the leaders we have today are the worst that the planet has ever seen anywhere. Geez, I mean, there are so many appalling leaders running around in control that have no concern for anyone but maintaining a system that's falling apart. So they don't care. And people are starting to wake up, but they've got to wake up quickly.
Absolutely, Steve. I mean, that's a thing. I think you're right. We've got to make our own choices here, our own decisions. And I know we talked briefly in the last hour about the Pleiadians, and I was going to ask, are there any sort of representations maybe in Aboriginal or original art or artifacts that demonstrate sort of UFOs or visitors from the sky? Are there any representations?
Yeah, because the genealogy stuff wasn't mind-blowing enough, Steve. You dropped the Pleiadian link on us as well. The originals told you had to tell, regardless of what people said. So, where's the artwork? I'm interested because I bet there's some out there.
Look, there is. There's some that we've been working on specifically. We've written about one place, which is the Cave of the Golden Boomerang, which I've just found out again we can actually get back to. Another elders is taking us back there. At that time, we thought we were the 8th and 9th people to see the cave. That cave is a series of about 6 figures.
Okay.
They're absolutely representational. So you can see every figure. You can see the muscle. You can work out whether they're male or female by the size of their hips. And original people aren't supposed to do any representational art. But what's fascinating about it is it's very much like the Sistine Chapel where one person's floating and they put their finger out to touch another person on the foot. And that's exactly what I see there, except old mate from the Sistine Chapel stole it. But at the start of it is a symbol.
Oh, yes, I'm just looking at this.
Yeah, and that symbol, we didn't know what it was. We thought it was a baby that the woman kicked on the ground because it was laying on a foot in front of her to the very beginning of the story.
Yeah.
We only found recently that it was actually the symbol for the Pleiades.
Yes.
And we knew it was the beginning of life, and the beginning of life starts with the Pleiadian symbol, then a woman.
Isn't this the golden bow or something? It's like a woman bent over in the sky that the Egyptians believe that the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, is where the womb is or something.
It's the same story. Yeah.
And this is because this
so
is what
we've seen. I've seen. There's another one, a place called Baragara, which has the symbol of the Pleiades, which was the first place that they landed after they landed at Mount Yango. It's the first place they put their feet down. They actually tell us they landed. The spaceship landed on a flattened plateau called Mount Yango. All of this stuff, all the elders know these stories back to front. Every one of them talks about them coming and landing. Now, that's a given. They talk about the fights that took place. They talk about the nature of each of the different aliens. They know all this stuff. And the problem is, it's not just the original people who know this. You go to America, you talk to the Hopi, you talk to the Navajo, you go around the world. They all keep these myths. They keep them alive because they were true, and they still are true. The beauty of it is, an original timeline goes in a straight line. And, of course, if they came a long, long time ago, and they were going to come again, weren't they? That was the do. So, yeah, look, the stories are, look, you go to the carry-on glyphs, which we've been to many, many times, and there are 300 hieroglyphs there. And we do know some are Proto-Egyptian. We've done a translation of one panel, which is 88% Proto-Egyptian, and it does talk about two brothers coming to Australia. Okay. But what's interesting is the most common glyph of all the glyphs there is a UFO.
Wow.
There's 8 of them.
So is this sort of like the wheel with the spokes that I'm seeing in some of this imagery? Is that the UFO you're describing?
No, that's a different one. That'd be on the Standing Stone site, the wheel with the spokes on it.
Yeah.
That was brought by the Pleiadians, and it's according to the president of the Australian Archaeological Society, who invested this particular site, investigated in some detail. That relates to the oldest temple on the planet. It's the message that came from the Pleiadians, and they put up a series of messages encoded into 184 standing stones. And there is the medicine wheel. And that, because we've got the translation, we actually got Slater's, that's the archaeologist at the time, we got his handwritten notes. And in that, it's a story about people who come from a light that shines far off and bring the sacred means of propagating life to this planet. Wow. It's quite a fascinating read that was written in 1939 by the president of the Australian Archaeological Society. He actually translated this particular place you're talking about. I spoke to the gentleman that destroyed the site.
Right.
Before he destroyed it. I mean, after he was 91 at the time. He did it when he was 15. And that particular site is amazing because just like Stonehenge, there were stone pillars. We've seen them. They weigh 6 to 10 ton and they stand meters high. And there was 184 of them that were stuck into the ground. But unlike Stonehenge, we have the map. In fact, I have the map of where all the stones went. In Stonehenge, they put them back where they thought they did. And unlike Stonehenge, on that map, we have the name of each stone and what the stone means. So, yes, that's an important site.
Yeah, and what do the stones mean? I mean, in Australia's Stonehenge, I mean, what is going on there?
This is the carry-on glyphs.
No, this is the carry-on glyphs.
That's the UFO, isn't it? Which I'm just looking at now, the image of them. They're incredible, Steve.
Yes, they are. Well, they're from carry-on. These particular ones are up near a place called Mullumbimby where we live, and this is it was actually a 10-acre complex of hundreds of stone arrangements that led on to two mounds, and the top mound had 184 standing stones. Now, you can only walk on those stones after you've been through all the ceremonies of the mounds before.
Right.
And elders from all over Australia would come to this place. I knew of elders who came from Broome to spend 10 years, 3 years walking from Broome to this particular site, 3 years walking back and 4 years doing their deeds and working on this particular place. This was the most sacred place in our country. In fact, people could do their dance from anywhere on the country on that mound, even though it wasn't their country. It was different to anywhere else in our country because this is where they left a testimony.
Wow, Steve, this
all
looks
original
amazing.
People come back to.
This looks, I mean, I'm looking now at a stone circle on top of a hill, which appears to have like a wheel through the middle of it. There's a huge kind of female standing stone outside. Then a henge entrance, I guess, a causeway almost of stones leading down the hill. Dude, this is amazing. This is crazy.
You know what? Let me tell you, tell you an amazing story about that amazing site. And it involves Kano again. And this is a true story, again, because there were plenty of people who saw it. That's what I love about when he does this. He doesn't do it so two people see it. We got permission. I went and saw the gentleman that bulldozed the site in 1940.
Right.
His father told him to do it because the government were going to take his land off him because of that site. It becomes such an issue.
Yeah.
So he bulldozed the rocks. He picked the big ones up and took them down to the dairy. And he went back the next day, and he told me the story himself, and he was going to bulldoze the mound. He started the engine up, and he just knew if he dropped the blade into the mound, he would die. And he's a staunch Catholic, 1940,
Wow.
doesn't believe this black fella stuff. Went back to his father and said, Dad, I moved the rocks, I've destroyed everything, spent days doing it. I can't dig the mound up, it's going to kill me. He said, that's ridiculous, son. But here's the trick. His dad couldn't drive a tractor, so the mound stayed. Okay, it left there. It's been there ever since. Now, the trick with this is that the rocks were hidden. Now, the problem with the story that this gentleman told me at the time was this. He said to me, we moved all the big rocks off the mound. We moved them down to the dairy, and one day or one night, they disappeared.
What?
Someone must have snuck down to the dairy and took them all.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, okay, yeah, I don't believe a word of that, but I'll take your word for that because they picked the rocks up. Now, I've seen the rocks. I've seen them. They've been unearthed, and they weigh 6-7 tons. Here's the problem with his story. There was only one person or one family in the whole of that area that did earth moving business, and it was him. They were the only ones who could move the rocks to begin with. They picked the rocks on a 45-degree slope, took them down 30 metres of that, carrying a 6-ton rock, and stacked them near the dairy. No one else could do it. No one else had the machinery until 1986, we checked. Therefore, my question is, what happened? Who moved the rocks?
Absolutely.
Now, the answer, we found it out. This is what we found out. We did some research, and we found that farm. His father owned it. And then the CBC Bank of Sydney, in 1937, they owned his farm. He didn't own the farm anymore. Then the government comes to his door. I know that because I read the letter, and says, these mounds, this place you've got, we're going to take the land off you. So the next day, Dad tells his son to destroy all the mounds and all the site, and lo and behold, in 1940, that farm goes back to his name again. It goes back to his... 1940 is the Second World War.
Yeah.
Who's making lots of money farming in the Second World War? Nobody is. But lo and behold, they lost the farm to the CBC Bank, who had a mortgage on their farm. They originally owned it. Then in 1940, after the young 15-year-old goes out and does... By the way, every time he told me about this, he bawled his eyes out because he knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
He knew what he did was wrong. And 2 weeks after we got an article up in the local paper, he passed away at 91. He wanted this fixed up. His soul was really aching.
Wow.
Because he knew what he did. He knew it was an amazing sight. And it's still such an amazing sight. Now, that leads to the most important part of this story. We got permission to go on. I spoke to the gentleman involved at 91. He said, you can have the farm for 2 days. Do what you want. We said, thank you. So I got 20 volunteers and 12 elders. And I told the 20 volunteers, thank you for coming, but unless we get spirit sign, you won't be digging. You won't be doing a thing. You won't be counting a rock.
Yes, we need permission.
So, you've got to for this site. We had to get spirit sign. The elders made that clear. And who was leading the way? Kano was, because he was the only one that knew the first language, and he knew the language of that place. So he stands upon a mound, and he says, unless we get spirit sign, we leave. And he called for a hawk to appear out of the forest, which it did. And we looked at him because he sung for it. He said, I'm singing for the hawks. And the hawk came. And we said, well, that's the sign, isn't it? And he smiled. He said, hawks. That's a hawk. Kano's got eyes that look straight through you, believe me. So we shut up. So we sat there. Within a minute, there were 4 hawks that had come out of the forest. Now, hawks are not flock birds, ladies and gentlemen. If you know much about hawks, it's not what they normally do.
They're very solitary birds, aren't they? Apart from the mates.
Yeah. They circled around us, and I said to Carno, 4. They're doing the circle, Carno. Will I go and get the rest? He said, not enough. He said, I want 8. I said, oh, shit, man, you got 4. Come on, you can't get 8. Within 2 minutes, and I'm not lying, and actually one of the other elders told me the name of the hawks because I didn't know the name, but he told me what they were, but I've forgotten. We had 2 circles, 2 round circles in a figure 8 circling directly above Carno. And he said, I needed 8. They have to form themselves in a figure 8. And if you look at the 2 circles on that mound, you join them up, you make the figure 8, don't you? So once I had the figure 8, then I was allowed to go back and get all our volunteers, and we had 2 days on site. But that was only after he sung up 8 hawks who came at his request and circled above us in a figure 8. So that tells you 2 things. One thing about the site and how sacred it still is. And secondly, that story I said about what do you want, a flat screen TV or the proper way of
Yeah.
It's just to reconfirm those who are wavering, saying, oh, big flat screen TV, 60 inches, just maybe. Yeah, well, see if you can get 8 hawks to fly above you. I've seen
no chance. That's crazy.
So how were those stones moved, Steve? I know you said that they were taken from the dairy. How were they moved?
Oh, look, I know what happened. I got the full story, and this came from a solicitor in town who will not put his name up, but we know the full story. What happened was these people who had that had this earth-moving equipment also had a very close relationship with all the quarries around town. And what happened was they took the 184 standing stones and dumped them next to a quarry. They dumped them on the side of the road and covered them with dirt. Now, what happened was some original people, women, were buying the block that those rocks were hidden on. And what happened was while they were buying the block, they uncovered it. He dug them out because he wanted to sell them. And he dug them out, and there were the rocks that had come from there. And ever since then, we've been trying to fight them to get them back. And we've been to the state government, the federal government, the local council, and every department we can. And every one of them says, we can't help you because it's private land. I've said to them, if it was gold, gas, or oil, could you get on?
Yes.
They said within an instant.
I bet they could if they were
fracking, the most important site in Australia, if not the world. The rocks are sitting on that place. And here's the interesting part. It was a subdivision, and the people who were making the subdivision were the same people who moved the rock off their farm. And they were the ones who uncovered it. And they dug it out. Now, it's the same family that actually moved the rocks from the quarry to the quarry, and they were working on the farm making the road for the subdivision. And, of course, they got together, and lo and behold, before you knew it, I was legally told if I went on to the property, which was for sale to the public, I'd be arrested. Wow. I was warned off the place, and one other person, and 2 solicitors told me if I wish to speak to them, I have to get my solicitor to talk to them because they will not speak to me.
Whoa.
Because I think it's important we get the rocks back.
And this is a property that's for sale. So to all intents and purposes, anybody should be, probably with permission, allowed access to that site. Certainly not threatened with jail and or will only can speak for a solicitor. Yeah.
I'm not allowed to even go near the place with my solicitor. I'm banned from going on there. And what they have done, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of those rocks, I've got pictures of them when I'm standing alongside them and I'm dwarfed by them.
Yeah, we're looking at a picture of it now, actually.
Yeah, well, guess what? They've moved them. They've taken half them and they're gone.
What? Again?
They've taken each rock that was stacked and put them in lines of 10 and stacked them off. Instead of 180, there's now about 80. Now, the bad news is they've actually taken them, they're gone. But the good news is there are so many people who know about it now. I've been told through the grapevine they know where the rocks have been taken to.
Yeah.
So they might think they're selling them because that's what he's doing. He's not allowed to. We've checked this too. Nobody's allowed to sell basalt in that region bar one person. He's not a dealer. He's not allowed to do it. So he's doing it on the sly.
Yeah.
He's also a criminal lawyer, the guy that's doing this. So we've got to be very careful with that part of it too. But the problem is these rocks, we know exactly where they go. They are in a very spiritual and sacred place, the most sacred place we have in this country, and no one in this country cares about it. Nobody.
Is this
So we have
is this a registered sacred site? Is because I mean,
yes,
it's like
yes,
surely, Steve, this is
yes,
goddamn illegal. This is a
yes. It is
desecration of
so,
what could be one of the most ancient sites
mm,
on
mm,
the planet, one of
yeah,
the most incredible rock formations I've ever seen,
yeah.
and the mound as well. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of you with some of these rocks now, and they look like big loaves of bread, like fingers. It looks to me like Gunung Padang a little bit, Chris.
Yes,
Oh, it does.
it's
That's good.
definitely got
It
that
reeks of
feel,
a
and it's basalt as well.
lot of things. And yes, you're right. That's the situation we've got.
Wow.
I think
Welcome to Australia.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely something. It does very reminiscent of Gunung Padang, which is a sort of man-made mountain used of andesite columnia.
Like fingers or loaves, don't they?
Yeah, but they use the volcanic columns.
Steve, can't you just show the solicitors the 8 hawks?
Sorry?
Can't you just show the solicitors the 8 hawk? Or anybody,
Well, yeah.
or anybody else for that matter?
It's funny because this guy, the solicitor who actually told us, he's actually told some people the whole story about these rocks, and they were dumped there and the whole thing. He did say he would come out and publicly defend us, but he didn't. He didn't. He wouldn't do it. We're in a situation now where I spoke to the elders about this and what they felt, and they said, "Don't worry." I said, "We have the map. We can find other columnar basalt rocks." By the way, I want you to think about something. These rocks were moved, we think 21 kilometres, and we're talking about thousands of tonnes of this before whitefellas come here. And I've got to tell you now, you'd need the best machinery in Australia to put those rocks back on the top of that mound.
Yeah, Steve, how are they moving
These
these
have
rocks?
been there, according to Slater, for 40,000 years. What technology were these people using we don't know about?
Do you have any idea of what technology they might have been using?
Yeah, I've got some of it.
Ooh.
I have got some of it. They use silcons. Silcons can pick up rocks. I've got 22 silcons at the moment. There's magic rocks. I do know, we've done a lot of research on this, no whitefella ever saw a silcon rock being used by an original person.
Wow.
The whole time they've been here.
Steve, let's just
there's a lot of stories about why that happened.
Steve, let's just rewind a quick second. Silcon and the Magic Rocks is an Australian rock band, isn't it?
Yeah, they're up. Yeah,
I'm teasing. Yeah. I'm teasing, dude. Right? Okay, so you're saying to us that 40,000 years ago, the originals moved these rocks using silcons.
Yes.
What's a silcon?
What it is, it's a shaped rock.
This is the. I'm looking at like a rock that looks almost pyramidal.
Yes. Well, it's actually long in shape, and they call it silcons. Whitefella called this a silcon because they use the word cylinder and cone together. What it is, these are pointing rocks. I have, of the 22, one does work for me marginally, so I can explain how it actually works. If you hold them in your hand, I've been told how to ground them and how to actually program them.
Right.
And then what happens is, in the one that works, it picks up your heartbeat when it's inside your hand, and it starts to make your heartbeat feel stronger and stronger, and then I can feel it. It then goes into the rock, and I can feel it throbbing backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And if you know the right songs at the finish, you can shoot that energy out. Now, let me give you a witnessed example of what happened in Tibet that was watched in 1937, which is very similar. And what happened there was, they brought in the yadakis, those long tubes that are like didgeridoos. They brought in drums and they brought in these rocks, pointing rocks. And the lamas, and there was about 50 whitefellas that saw this. It's quite famous. And they sung and they made noises. And these noises eventually lifted the rocks up and then carried them up the hill. And the lamas were waiting to build. And they were moving the rocks like that.
We've discussed this story on the show, actually. The harmonic, harmonic resonance.
Yeah, well, I know of it in Australia to call the rocks. And he called the rocks and they jumped onto him.
Wow.
So this is what you can do. If you know the right song, I don't know the songs that go with a silcon. That's the drawback. We know the rest, but we don't know the intonation, the note on the yadaki or didgeridoo. We don't know that. But if you could do that, you could then project the energy that I can feel building in one of it, but I can't make it go out. If you knew how to do that, then you can start moving rocks. Now, I've seen rocks in the bush at one place called Trina Site, a completely cubed rock of granite, and it would weigh 10 tonnes, and it was cut into a perfect square and placed on a platform. You could see it's been moved, and you just couldn't even imagine today, it was so steep, how you could get any machine to move it. You couldn't. You've got to use these rocks. It's sound and resonance that moves them.
Wow.
And they have this. And the silcons were a magic rock that could actually have energy. Now, the point with the silcon is, until it's placed in a human's hand, it will not work. All these rocks work in symbiosis with the human. They energize with the human. Remember, the human has the magic within them. You have to use that magic to start that rock off. And then once you started that, then the rock has got a power of its own. Now, the rocks can do things on themselves too.
Almost like a spiritual drill.
The rocks are. Yeah, the rocks are that. People don't understand. They say that crystals have an energy, and they do. But remember, this planet is made from rock. Everything in this planet, the soil comes from rock. The planet resonates in love. Well, the rocks are part of it. You can't leave them out. And some rocks, the rocks that have been marked and sung to, they have put their heart and soul and DNA into those rocks. We have rocks that are eminently evil, and I've seen them make people sick, and I've seen them kill someone.
Wow.
We have rocks that can heal people too, because humans are good and bad. These rocks are good and bad too.
So what kind of things can these rocks do, Steve?
Sorry?
What kind of things can these rocks do? I mean, apart from lift stone, what other things are they capable of?
Which story? I know which one we'll do. I was trying to work which story best. Look, the best way to do this is never to give an opinion, always to give a fact. I had 9 of these rocks. I was in contact with the Australian Museum. They had the rocks. So what we did was we got arranged to go down to the bowels of the Australian Museum in Sydney. Special trip. Went and saw all their artefacts, and then we were going to show them the rocks and see what happened. And this is what actually took place. I took 2 other people with me. One was a psychic. We went inside there. Within 2 minutes, the psychic was crying her eyes out and said, I've got to get out of here. The place was killing.
Wow.
We had 1,000 artifacts, 4 levels down, sitting on steel shelf, bathing in neon light and being fed an air conditioner. And those artifacts were sacred and did not want to be there. They wanted to be on country. It made me ill. I couldn't stand the hour I was there. We had women picking up spears and showing these people all these things. It was just an affront to culture. It was wrong at every level. Those rocks should be on the ground, in the dirt, on the wood, not there. At the end of it, I felt ill. I was still there, but I wanted to leave. But I stayed because at the end I was going to see third in charge of the museum, showed her the rocks, and she said, my God, this changes the world's history. I said, yes, we all know that. The Smithsonian want one of these rocks. They know about it. Believe me, one of these rocks they've written to us twice about. They want to store it. We'll never see it again. Anyway, I said, we know that. I said, what we're after is this. We are going to store those rocks on an island, a sacred island, Carter. We want you to join us. We'll store the rocks there, and you can take a couple off, put them in the museum and put them back. They've got to stay there. Well, they didn't want to do that. Anyway, the long and short of it was, after 5 minutes, I packed the rocks up and I put them in a bag. And I went straight to the airport. I want to get back home to my place. I was in Sydney. I don't like being in big cities like that. And all I want to do is go home because I had a miserable time in that bloody museum. I can't stand it because those rocks were crying. So I've got my main rock, through the security thing. You know that thing with the X-ray thing where they check to see if you put bombs in there?
Yes.
Lo and behold, the bag goes through, and old mate's looking at me. Says, what's in the bag there, mate? I said, rocks. Nothing else. Oh, hang on. I'll put that through again. So it's your bag, mate. You can do what you want. Okay, so he did. Put it through a second time. He asked me the same question. Exactly the same question. To which I said, they're rocks. They're just rocks. You know, going to do it again. By now, I'm getting a bit of an audience, mate, because the people around lining up aren't going anywhere. There's only 2 gates going through. They've cut a couple out. And we're starting to build up a bit of an audience, and they're all looking at me like I'm a terrorist. So he goes through the third time, and he asked me again. I said, mate, is this Groundhog Day or something? I said, I told you, they're Aboriginal rocks. Said, right then, I'm bringing in the supervisor. I thought, oh, this is interesting. So in he comes with a pair of white gloves, and he's got a label across that says team supervisor, so he's got to be someone important, hasn't he? And he looks me down and says, what's going on? There's a problem here. I said, yeah, there is. I want to get on the plane, but I can't. He won't let me go. He didn't like my attitude because I just thought, this is a joke. Anyway, sits down, he gets the other guy to get off, and he puts the bag in. Comes through, and he looks at me, he says, what's in there? I thought, oh, shit, here we go. Oh, I apologise, readers, I shouldn't have said that. But I did say that at the time. I thought, what's going on here? I said, look, there are sacred rocks, man. I said, they're very important to Aboriginal people. I'm looking after them. We've just been to the museum. I'm taking them back home to store them on country. No, they're not. I thought, oh, geez. So he does it 2 more times. And by this time, the line has now gone out into the main walkway, and we got about 150 people in fair income, 149 sets of eyes are looking at me. I'm the only one that isn't. And they're all thinking, what's going down here? So old mate then brings the bag across with his gloves and puts the bag in front of me, and I go to touch my bag. He says, don't touch that. It doesn't belong to you.
What?
I said, what do you mean about it, mate? That's my bag. He said, not now. He said, until I give it to you, it's my property. I said, whose law is that? He said, that's the Australian government's law. This is mine. I said, oh, right. Okay. I thought, this is funny. This is good. And he said, right, what's in there? I said, man, I've told you, they're just rocks. He said, I'm going to search them. I'm going to go through your bag right now. I said, right then. He said, well, I'm going to tell you about another law. This is an original law. I said, if you unwrap those rocks, you're going to die. He said, who said that law? I said, no, you had your law. Your law says you can own the bag. I said, my law says this. If you touch those rocks, man, if you unwrap them, you're going to die. I said, you can have a look at them wrap. I said, but you can't unwrap them. That's the law. And he looked at me and he gave me a filthy look. But you know what, mate? He didn't unwrap them. He did not unwrap them.
Yeah. I mean, that's a red rag to a bull, isn't it? Saying that to him.
One of them out. And he puts them out in front of the bag. And he looks in the bag and he shakes it a few times. It's just a carry bag. It's canvas. It's not that big.
Yeah.
And he calms down a bit. And he looks at me. He said, what's going on here? I said, what do you mean? I said, from the start, I said, they're rocks, man. He said, no. He said, we put that bag through 6 times. He said, all we got was one huge black mass. We couldn't see a thing. It's never happened before. This is an X-ray machine. All we saw was a dark black mass. Wow. Do you know what that was?
What?
That was the energy of that place that I took the rocks to. That's what they were carrying when they went in there. And they knocked out the security system. They turned it off. He said, we're going to have to turn the machine down. It's broken. I didn't bother telling him, no, mate, it's just the rocks are upset because they've been to a shitty place, because I don't think he would have picked it up. And I thought he was pretty rude anyway. And after I found out the Australian government owned my bag, I thought, bugger you can deal with it now. But that gives you an idea what these rocks are capable of. Their machines couldn't see through it because it was angry. It absorbed energy that came out of that place that made us ill and was giving that out and took out their machines. So again, as I said...
So who made these rocks, Steve?
Who made them?
Yeah, were they original people that made them? Or
Yes, they are. I mean, there's one that tells the story of the Pleiadians. I'm not sure about that one. That's a special one. That's number 1. And that's been given special. That's the most important rock we have, and that's the story of them coming. It was made by them. And there's another one which has been made on top of a meteor, which is number 5, that actually is the beginning of life. That could be made by them, but all the others are made by original people. You see, they took the technology. There is technology. I've actually had a professor of geology from one of the top universities in Australia that said that rock, number 1, he said, that is the greatest mystery I've ever seen anywhere on this planet. He said, because there's technology on that rock we don't have today. Now, we have rocks that show technology that can't be done today. We have proof these rocks have been heated and reheated at 3,700 degrees Celsius. There's things going on with those rocks that were made that don't make sense. But what people don't realise is the outside package which is really technologically very savvy, is just the aperitif. It's what's inside those rocks. You see, all these rocks have a silica coat on top. They've melted a coat on top. Now, remember, silica is what we store our information on computers.
Yes, yeah.
They covered all of these rocks. They're all different base rocks of different colours with a thin layer of chert and resin. The chert is silicon. And they've stored the information on the rock, inside the rock, and cut it into it. It's so sophisticated and so complicated. There's only one problem. We're nowhere near as smart as the people who made the message.
Yes, we can't understand it
today that we can't read what they told us so long ago. That's our problem.
Wow.
None of us.
So we've got magic rocks rocks that you can imbue, I guess, power to, and you can utilize for a number of different reasons. But also carved on these rocks that may or may not be ours, may have been made by another race completely, possibly not even from this planet. Is like, I guess, pictograms or stories carved into it, but also a coating on top of the rock of a silica that can contain even more information as well.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes, because
sorry, I just wanted to get that straight there. Dude, yeah, that's amazing.
We're claiming is here, and this is, of course, if you're talking, it sounds like very high technology. Yeah, of course it is, but we are talking about people who seeded the bloody planet and came here.
Yeah,
they've got the technology,
exactly,
and they came here for the missing link.
Well, it's interesting that they could have, I guess, given us much more, say, advanced technology, what we consider to be advanced technology today, but they didn't. They've almost utilized our own spiritual energies and the energies of the earth itself and put those two things together in kind of like a lesson about what you were talking about before, what we should be, in a sense.
Yeah, what they decided to do is, unlike the other alien groups who've come here at different times, that for a lot of different reasons, and one of them was we were told they were betrayed and their mothership was blown up. So that probably knocks down the amount of technology they can drag in anyway. But they still brought knowledge of that with them. But yes, we've seen so many instances of things that don't make sense. Now, one that comes to mind straight away, if I go back to Carry-On, which we mentioned earlier, Arnie Minnie Mace, who is a very respected elder, gave me two objects she picked up the first time she went between the 3 walls at Carry-On with Ray Johnson, and they were the first people to bring it to the attention of mainstream. She picked up 2 objects, one which is a bone, which I've actually taken to a base hospital and told me it's an ancient bone and it's human, and the other one's very interesting because it can't be from this planet. It's a piece of jewellery that was found between the walls where the Egyptian brothers were, and it may have been carried by Nefertari, one of the brothers, but I've had it analysed by the top laboratory in Australia. Actually, he begged me to analyse it, and I said for a while, no, you can't, because I've got to get Minnie Mace's approval, and I did. Then I gave it to him, and I wondered why he wanted to look at it. And it turned out that he analysed the metal that was found between these walls in Australia, between the walls there, in the middle of the bush, nowhere. And the metal is unlike any metal that's ever been found on this planet ever, and I've got the analysis, and I'll tell you what the analysis is. It's one of the hardest pieces of metal you'll find. It is 73% aluminium. Now, here's the problem already.
Well, that's a man-made metal.
Well, every aluminium alloy is at least 85% aluminium. This is 73%. So it's lower than any other aluminium ever made, but it gets weirder. It is 3% copper.
3% copper.
That brings you up to 76%. And the other 24%, according to my friend from the laboratory, who has the best machinery in Australia for this, they can't identify. They are metals they do not recognise.
What? What?
And since then, they checked again. He said, I'm checking. They could be oxides. He said, I doubt it because that's the only thing left. He came back and he said, mate, that 24%, 1/4 of that piece of metal, which I have right now, we do not know what it's made from. But it's made the metal. It's made the aluminium. It's not like normal aluminium, man. This stuff is rock hard. But he said it has made it like steel, and we don't know what's in there. So that rock I carry each day, and there's no scientist on this planet that can tell you what 1/4 of that metal is, but it's there.
Or
so my
I guess the
is,
process of, the alloy in a sense as well, how they've actually got all these 3 metals together, this unknown metal, the 3% copper and the 73% aluminium. I mean,
well, copper doesn't go there.
copper doesn't what? Sorry, Steve.
Well, the one he said, we thought it was Egyptian.
Yeah.
And this guy, Graham, came up and he said, man, he said, I've done some work on this. There's no bauxite in Egypt. It can't be Egyptian. He said, and also, we only started making aluminium in the 1950s, really. And it's a difficult process to get all the shit out of it. It takes a lot of time and high temperature. And he said, why are they putting copper in there? They don't put copper in aluminium. And he said, but where's the other 24%? And I've still got the scratch marks on it, and I still have the lab's report. And these guys did this for us for nothing because they knew that was wrong. So really, if you want proof, if you want proper scientific proof, I can destroy their story about humanity's history with that crappy little piece of metal I've got because 20% of it don't come from me.
That is
but hang on.
mental.
The funny part of that story is, well, I've got some genes inside of me that don't come from here. And you know, there's one other thing worth bearing in mind. Have you guys heard of a dog called the dingo?
Yes.
Well, it's not. It's not a wolf. It's not related to any dog or wolf in the world. They did some mitochondrial DNA. Sydney Uni, pretty big uni in Australia, they decided to work out whether the dog came from Africa or India because there were fights about where did the dingo come from because there's no dogs in Australia. And there aren't. There are none. What they found out was it's not related to any other dog, wolf, or any other canine in the world. So it's now a separate species.
Wow.
Where did it come from?
Yeah, where did it come from? Is this...
Well, guess what? We got genes in us, right, that don't come from any other human, right, in original people.
Yeah.
Now we find a dog, but its genes don't come from any other dog on this planet either. You see a pattern of emerging here?
Yeah. So
There's a pattern.
did the Pleiadians bring their pets? Do the same with them?
Yes, the oldest. In fact, Gabby Duncan took us to Bulgandry in front of the Ancient Aliens film crew, and they should have filmed this bit. They didn't put it in.
Right.
And he looked at a 9-meter canoe that by Army, because he had a helmet on. We've got no net, and he had the helmet. He was holding the sun and the moon, and he had his foot on top of a 9-meter canoe, and he pointed at the 4 kangaroos, and he said the Pleiadians brought them from Pleiades. That's why the kangaroo is different to any other animal on this planet.
I was going to say, dude, because we just thought it was because it was an island and it was so cut off from everywhere else since this land bridge had long since gone. But the reality is that Australia has got a shed load of animals that just don't exist anywhere else.
Don't exist anywhere. And we all thought they did. But think of this. A kangaroo falls pregnant, female kangaroo falls pregnant when it decides to. It may not fall pregnant for 6 years because it doesn't need to because the timing isn't right. It will decide when it wants to conceive if the timing is good. And if it's not, it won't have a baby. Even though there's one there, it'll stop it. No animal does that. No animal says, right, don't feel like a baby today. I'm not going to have one. You can't do that. And they can naturally. And they've said they do that. And I've said to women, look how a kangaroo gives birth to a baby. When the fetus is 2 days old,
it climbs out and gets in a pouch.
And sits there. Which would you prefer? And they say that's primitive.
Yeah.
They prefer a pouch.
But again, I mean, I was just thinking that in my head, how many animals birth themselves basically after 2 days, crawl up the outside of the mother, get inside a pouch and chill out there?
Yeah.
I'd never considered some of these things before. Just like my Saturday is now going to be filled with thinking about this. Listen, Steve, dude, we're going to have to stop you because we've totally run over and run out of time. So I'm going to have to be quite creative with how I finish this show. Dude, I've loved speaking to you today. I think it's been absolutely fascinating. I'd love to get you back on. Me and Christy can do some more research, get you back on it and really get into some of these stories because what you've told us today is nothing short of mind-blowing.
Well, remember, it came from the original people. All I'm doing is nearly every story I told you I passed on. Our job is basically to collect the information and get it out in a way people can understand, but it's really easy when they keep giving us the stuff they do. It's not that hard to do it.
Wicked.
It's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I think if we've probably each of these aspects. I think we've got a show in each aspect.
Oh yeah, just the genealogy
Egypt,
alone.
The genealogy, the sacred sites, the out of place artifacts. I mean, each one of those is almost a show in itself, and we would really love to explore these a bit deeper with you.
I'm happy to, mate. I quite enjoyed being with you guys.
Dude, keep spreading that love then. If this is the message from today's show, Go out there, man, and keep spreading that message. Keep spreading that little bit of love.
And we're going to try and spread it as well.
Oh, dude, let's go. No, Steve, thanks for speaking to us, mate. Take it easy.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, guys. Good fun.
Thanks very much, Steve Strong, then. That was wicked. Peace out, be lucky. We've run out of time. Have a fabulous week, whatever it is you're doing. You're listening to the Asylum 107.3.